Hi, how you doing? Are you a person like me who is itching to get started with sowing seeds now that January's here? Or maybe you're a new gardener, or you're someone who hasn't sown seed from indoors before and you're not sure when to start. So let's talk about how we go about this in a truly cold growing area. And a little later, we're going to talk about my top 10 vegetable seed varieties to grow in 2025. My name is Sharon, and I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. There is a lot of conflicting information out there. A lot of it comes down to, most of that information is not specific to Zone 3 or colder, or Zone 3 and 4, around that. A lot of information out there is Zone 6 and 7 and 8, and we can't go by that kind of information. Why do we start some seed indoors? Well, because if we just planted seed in the garden, it might not have enough time to germinate and give us the maximum amount of fruit that plant should be able to give us. And peppers are a great example of this. If you just sowed pepper seed directly into the garden, they probably would germinate, but they wouldn't have enough time to grow big and grow lots of fruit. And so we start them indoors so that they get a head start, and then they can give us the maximum amount of fruit that plant should be able to give us. Now that I think of it, I've never had a pepper plant volunteer in the garden. I've had tons of tomatoes and squash and all kinds of other vegetables, but I can't say that I've ever had a pepper plant volunteer. So you buy your seeds and seed starting mix and one of those trays with the dome and the little pots. The first piece of advice that I would have is to forego those little peat pellets, those little dried up peat pellet discs that you then rehydrate and put a seed in. They really aren't the best for starting seeds. That little netting, really has to be pulled off or peeled off, and they have a tendency to go, those peat pellets have a tendency to go from wet to dry very quickly. They're hard to rehydrate again if they do happen to dry out. They're just not a great thing. I haven't used them in forever, and sometimes I've bought a plant that has been in a peat pellet, and then that peat pellet has been planted into like a 3-inch or 4-inch pot, a bigger pot, and when I go to transplant it, I see that there is still that netting around there, and it really hasn't rooted into the soil, and I'm not a fan of the peat pellets. They are convenient, but yeah, not the greatest way to start seeds. Get some seed starting mix instead, and like I said, one of those trays with the little pots in there and a clear cover that's called a humidity dome, and you'll have much better success with that. And if I could give you another piece of advice right now in January, be patient, because it's really too early to be starting the vast majority of seeds. If you are going to start seeds now, you have to have a grow light. You have to have some sort of lighting that you can use for grow lights, and those lights have to stay on for 16 hours a day, and depending on the strength of the grow light that you have, it has to be, quite low down, right on top of the plant almost, unless your grow lights are really strong, then you can have them up a little bit higher. But you also have to look into the future and say, do I have the room to pot these up? Once the seedlings become bigger, you have to put them into bigger pots. And, it's a whole thing starting right now. And you might think you have a nice sunny window. I have a nice sunny window right behind me. It's south facing, and a bay window, but I can't grow seeds, vegetable seeds in that window. For one, it's too cool right by a window. And second of all, our sun is just not strong enough. So right now in January, our sun, and by our I mean anyone north of the 45th parallel, our sun just isn't strong enough for windowsill gardening, and it probably won't be until the end of March at the very earliest. On the back of the seed packets, it's always going to say when to start the seeds. It's going to say 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost date, or 4 weeks before your last frost date. The majority of seeds fall between 6 and 10 weeks prior to the last frost date, some as early as 4, but the majority I think would be 6 to 10 weeks, sorry. For 2025, I'm calculating back from May 25th. That's when I'm assuming that most of the transplants will be able to be planted out right around that date. That must be just a little bit after the May long weekend this year. But, you know, we shoot for the May long weekend, but honestly, the last week of May is probably always better for us, unless you're planting direct sowing from seed, and then May long weekend is probably fine. Those seeds won't germinate until the temperature, the soil temperature, is correct for them to germinate. Waiting a week, having warmer temperatures, they're probably going to germinate just a little bit quicker for you. The exception to the transplants for May 25th would be peppers and zucchini and squash and melon and cucumbers. Those I wait until the first or second week of June to plant them out. And because I wait, I start them indoors, but I start them quite late. The zucchini, the melons, the squash, the cucumbers, those all start May 1st indoors. And as soon as they germinate, I take them out to the greenhouse, but they could grow indoors under lights for a few weeks. Those plants I mentioned like warm soil, and they're going to shock if they're subjected to cold soil or cold growing conditions. And when they shock, sometimes it takes them, they may survive, that doesn't mean they're going to die, but sometimes it takes them a little while to bounce back, or they may not fruit properly, you know, when they're supposed to give you a whole bunch of vegetables. They're not going to do that because they were shocked at one point. And then any of the plants or transplants that like cool growing conditions, you can plant those out a couple weeks before the last frost date, because as long as they're hardened off, they're going to survive some pretty cool temperatures. As a matter of fact, my cabbage and broccoli transplants, I put them outside and start hardening them off, you know, toward like end of April. I'm already starting to harden them off, and they could be planted out into the garden probably Mother's Day. I've had all of those plants, as well as lettuce, flattened by snow, and they survived just fine. They actually look quite perky when that was going on. Like they really enjoyed that kind of wet and cold growing condition. So the cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and lettuce, anything in the lettuce family, all of those could be planted out, or start getting hardened off as soon as they're pushing out their second set of true leaves. And I'm just going to explain that for those who may not know. The first set of leaves that come up when you plant a seed, those are called seed leaves. And then the next set of leaves that comes up, that is the first set of true leaves. And then after that, the second set of true leaves, and so on. And then those seed leaves actually are going to dry up and fall away, and your plant isn't dying, just so you know. So going back from May 25th, that's the day I decided that it's going to be safe to plant out. 10 weeks before that planting out date is March 16th. And 8 weeks before that before planting out date is March 30th. And right now we're at about 19 weeks before a safe planting out date. And probably 20 or 21 weeks until it's safe to plant out those warm season crops. And you know, I have a small greenhouse, and if you've not seen that video, I'll put a description in the link just below. And so I have that small greenhouse, but I still follow all of these rules because all of my plants, or the majority of my plants, are going to get planted out into the garden. And I don't want plants that are too big to easily transplant out into the garden without suffering transplant shock. The bigger the plant, the more susceptible that plant will be to transplant shock. It has more leaves that it has to what's the word? Not respirate, but provide moisture to the leaves. It has more of them. Maybe it would have fruit, and the fruit will drop. It's much better to plant out smaller plants, and the smaller plants will catch up very quickly to the bigger plants and probably surpass them because they won't suffer transplant shock. The Farmer's Almanac has a pretty handy online tool where you input your postal code or your zip code, and it calculates everything for you and tells you when you should be starting seed indoors or when you should plant them out directly into the garden, because some seeds shouldn't be planted indoors. Carrots and beets would be another. Green beans are only direct sown outdoors. I've played around with that online tool at Farmer's Almanac, and it does seem to be quite accurate. So the earliest vegetable seed that you would probably start indoors would be onion seeds, and that would be around the end of January. After hardening off, those onion transplants can be planted out fairly early into the garden, I'd say probably around Mother's Day. The next after that, the most common vegetable that would be planted in the garden would probably be celery. That would need to be planted, and I think that would be at about 10 to 12 weeks prior to planting out, which would bring you to about the beginning of March. And what about peppers? A lot of people think they should be starting peppers now. I used to start peppers earlier, but even then, that was about the last week of February. When I started them early like that, they got to be beautiful plants, but I was constantly having to pick off blossoms because it's recommended when you're planting them out into the vegetable garden, it is recommended to pinch off the flowers so that the plants put all their energy into setting some roots before they start setting fruit. So I pushed my seeding date indoors to mid-March. They spend about 5 weeks, 6 weeks under the grow lights in the house, and then I take them out to the greenhouse for another 5 weeks probably, until early June when I put them out into warmer soil in the garden. Peppers don't like night temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. They will shock, which is exactly what happened to mine last year. And then they never really did. They bounced back a bit and they did produce some fruit, but nowhere near what I usually get. So you don't have to be in a rush to get your pepper plants planted out into the garden or get them really big indoors before getting them outside. There's no benefit to putting a pepper plant or a tomato plant or quite a number of those warm season plants. There's no benefit to planting them out cold and forcing them to deal with that cold weather because they're just not going to produce for you. So by starting them in mid-March, and by the time they're done in the greenhouse, by the time I'm ready to plant them out into the garden, they're just starting to push their first flowers. And that's perfect timing, I think. Some of those specialty super hot peppers may require a longer growing season, and you'll have to go by the back of the seed packet to see how long before last frost you need. Those two, though, would need nice warm weather, and you don't need to worry about getting them kicked out too early. You may have seen my video that I started Lisianthus flower seeds in the middle of December, and they are super slow growers. Here we are 3-4 weeks in, and they are just they've just finished their first set of true leaves, so they take a long time. Geraniums, if you're going to grow geraniums from seed, you should start those by the end of January. Pansies can be started early because they can be planted out fairly early. They tolerate cold weather as long as they've been properly hardened off. I'm growing Dusty Miller this year. I grew it from seed last year as well, and I start those at the end of January, and I had fairly nice sized transplants for planting out. Perennial flowers can also sometimes be started early too from seed, and the benefit there is that you may get some flowers later in some blooms later in the season. Perennials generally won't produce flowers until the second year. However, if you start them inside earlier, you might get flowers toward the end of the season. But honestly, most of the flowers and vegetable seeds that you would want to start indoors would be started after March 1st. And that's why I'm saying be patient now. Your seed packet is going to tell you how many weeks prior to the last frost that you need to start the seed inside. Now, if you must seed something early right now, if you just can't wait any longer, sow some lettuce in a pot. That'll tolerate a lower light. You can windowsill garden those because they tolerate lower light, and they also tolerate, or prefer actually, a cooler temperature to grow in. And you'll get lettuce leaves in no time. You'll be adding a few lettuce leaves to your sandwich. So here are my top 10 vegetable seeds to grow in 2025. And I will list them down below in the description as well, so that they're there. Now, most of these you will not find on the seed racks in the home improvement stores or in the grocery stores. And so I will also list all of the seed companies, all of the online links to the seed companies that I have used, and they're all Canadian seed companies. I like to order as much as I can from only one or two companies, and that's simply to save the shipping, because with a lot of them you're going to pay, whatever it is, 7 or 8, or I think that's generally what it is maybe $7.95 or something like that for shipping. And to order one pack here and one pack there and pay $7.95 for each one for shipping, I'd sooner order as many as I can from one company. I'd say sign up for their emails though and request a catalog, and you never know, you might get a code for free shipping. So here's my fancy seed storage. Just a shoebox. I've done it that way for years. It's actually 2 levels of shoebox. There's a few more seeds underneath the first level. And I just keep those on a shelf in the basement, which I've said before, the basement runs about 15 degrees C. So it's not overly warm down there. They seem to be just fine. Don't need anything special. I don't keep anything in the fridge. And I also don't keep a lot of extra seed from year to year. Not all seeds will be viable after a certain length of time. But anyways, I'm going to just show you for the seeds that I do have with me. I just put in my last order, and so some of the seed are still need to be shipped. The cabbage that I like to grow is called Tiara, and this cabbage is really good for coleslaw, super for coleslaw and for frying. It's not good for cabbage leaves, for cabbage rolls, and I've not tried making sauerkraut with it, so I don't know what that's like. But you can plant them tight for smaller heads, and it says they make 4-pound heads. I don't know that they are. They have very good storage capability. I just wrap them in cellophane and keep them in the spare fridge downstairs. They'll last for, I bet you they'll last for 2-3 months. So they're pretty good that way. And then the watermelon I like is called Sureness. And I've spoken about this before in another video that I made about seeds, and this is the Sureness hybrid. I start that indoors on May 1st, and then I plant it out sometime in June. It's super sweet. There is a video on my watermelon harvest, so you can see what the Sureness variety is like. Consistently, year after year, it gives me mature watermelons. This year I'm going to grow melons and cantaloupe instead of watermelon. I only have a certain amount of space, and so I do have to make decisions. And I've wanted to grow cantaloupe and melon for some time now, so I figured this is the year. The peppers I like to grow are Red Knight and Olympus, and I start these in mid-March. One is 67 day, the other is 72. You get lots of peppers on a plant, and they mature to red on the plant. They're thick-walled and really juicy. I have a record weight on one of 462 grams, which is over a pound, and on just one pepper. And every year I try and beat that. I haven't succeeded yet. I came close last year. Both of those varieties, I can't recommend them enough. They are excellent varieties for cold zone growing. The hot peppers I grow are a Fresno variety, and they are called Flaming Flare. And I start those in mid-March as well. They're 55 days, and they actually are usually ready before the bell peppers are ready. But they hold really well just in a plastic bag in the fridge. They last for a long, long time. I can't remember what they are on the Scoville scale, the level of hotness, but they are plenty hot for me. They are on the lower end of the Scoville scale. I use them for salsa. And I find that just that amount of heat that they have is quite perfect. The redder they get, the longer they stay on the plant, the hotter they get. And of course, like any hot pepper, the seeds hold a lot of heat as well. For cucumbers, it's hard to narrow down because I do have a few varieties that I do like, but I think Summer Dance is one of the better ones. This is a long English cucumber, and the plant doesn't seem to have much in the way of disease or problems that way, and it just gives, so many cucumbers. Most years I was planting two hills of Summer Dance, and I'm cutting that down to one this year simply because it provides so many cucumbers. And I also grow Corentine. Corentine is an improved cool breeze. It's also parthenocarpic, and that means they don't need bees. They pollinate all on their own. So those are the cucumbers. Tomatoes. If I had to pick one tomato, that's what I was toying with in my head. What would I grow if I could only grow one tomato? And I think it would be Juliet. You can't make a sandwich out of it, but you can make sauce out of it, and you can put them in your salad, and you can snack on them. So they fit a lot of the categories that I would like. They are great roasted tomato. They're not a small cherry, but I think they might be called saladette. They're like a 2-bite tomato. And so Juliet, I love these. I really do. I grew San Marzano last year for paste tomatoes, and they did good. I was happy with them. The year before that I had blossom end rot, but last year I didn't, and I think I may have found the answer to blossom end rot that doesn't really have anything to do with watering, but that's just my theory, so I'm not going to really pass that along. I also like to grow a yellow sweet snacking tomato, and I've been growing sun sugar the past few years. I used to grow sun gold, but I found they split really easy. And so I switched to sun sugar. They don't split as readily, but the skin is thicker. And so this year I am trying Esterina Hybrid. They may replace the sun sugar. I've also got on order Plum Regal. I've read great things about this. It comes highly recommended from some other people that I've talked to. And so I'm going to try them this year, and they may replace the San Marzano. For squash, I'm going to grow the butternut squash this year. I don't grow it every year. I have grown it in the past, and I have used the early butternut hybrid. It's a 75-day from William Dam Seeds, and I've had success with that in the past, and so that's what I'm going to grow again this year. Green beans, green bush beans. I grow Provider, and they're really good. They germinate easily. They're nice and tender, straight. I used to grow Blue Lake, and I swore by those. Something happened to that seed along the way. They started to produce like these flat pods that were basically inedible, that never got nice and round. They were just flat and tough, and I don't know what happened to that seed. I see that there now is an improved Blue Lake seed, so maybe they've done something different to it, but I started growing Provider. I bought a great big seed pack, so I'll use those until the seed doesn't germinate anymore. And onion, which I'll be starting at the end of the month. Last year I grew Cartier hybrid onion from seed, and I ordered that through William Dam. It's a yellow onion. It's not very strong. I bought it because of the storage capability, and I'll tell you, it's storing beautifully. It's still really hard, and I just keep them in the basement. I don't have a cold room, so it's doing very, very well for storing. I'll just mention that I've also grown green onion, bunching onion from seed, and I've grown Parade a few times. It's really good. They actually have wintered for me as well, and I allowed a bunch of them to winter. They grew again the next year, and then they set seed. So I have a lot of, I kept that seed. I have a lot of green onion seed. I'll be doing a video on starting those onion seeds in just 2 or 3 weeks time. So if you're not sure how to go about starting onion seed indoors, join me in that video. I'm not going to grow corn this year, but I will mention that the variety Northern Super Sweet is a 62-day corn. I've grown it in the past. I've actually pre-started the seeds indoors around May 1st, and then plant them out not very long after that, 3 to 4 weeks after that. They actually transplant out very easy, and I've had corn ready by August long weekend by doing it that way. The Northern Super Sweet also tolerates and germinates and grows on nicely in cool, wet soil. So I hope I've given you some ideas about some good seed varieties that will do well for you in Zone 3. Thanks for watching today. I hope you found it informative or helpful, and if you have any questions, or if I neglected to touch on something that you were hoping that I would talk about, let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to read those and comment back. If you did like the video, consider giving me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and tell your friends. Thanks. See you.